Hey everybody, this is Rydo and we're back to the minigame podcast. Today is Wednesday, August 13th. So, yeah. We'll do a little bit of warm up and then scroll through the SteamDB 24-hour peak concurrent chart here while I warm up. And then we'll jump into the video game news. My macros to open up all my news articles for today didn't run quite well, so I had to run them a second time, so everything is going to be kind of out of order, and we'll be jumping around more than usual, although usual, frankly, is not usual at this point for as often as these macros just don't run. I am starting to wonder, frankly, if it wouldn't be easier to just manually open up all of the news articles myself. And yes, I do know I'm gonna just end up changing my coding, changing the software I use completely to try and get away from this inconsistency problem. Over the past couple days I've been making little bits of progress here and there, cleaning and decluttering my house. I cannot sing the praises enough of a Amazon Prime deal that I got, which is just a bunch of really small containers. The smallest ones are about an inch squared, just little plastic bins, like the designed for drawer organizers in the bathroom or in the kitchen type thing. And just like one set of that has drastically improved the look and the feel of organizing my drawers in my bathroom. As far as just, it gives a lot more of that military border type ordering, and by military border I mean the borders on military plates that keeps food separated, which honestly I don't think that really is even how military plates are done now, or were done even consistently in the past. It's more like baby plates where the foods are separated, and I don't know why they even do that with baby plates either. It's not like that leads to anything other than maybe portion control a little bit, but probably not. Yeah, and I guess the place where it's most prominent is lunch trays in schools, which those lunch trays in schools probably were made decades before. Very possibly full of chemicals, microplastics, or something else, and they just don't know about it, and they don't care to know about it. But yeah, for the right now, there's a pretty good deal where I could get a whole nother set for like $9, and if I thought I really needed another set, I would get it, but I'm not sure I do, because I still have quite a lot of trays already, and they are a little too small for kitchen items, because like bathroom items include things like, you know, bobby pins, or maybe razors or something like that, something that are shorter, where kitchen items tend to be the length of a spoon or longer, and often much bigger than that. So yeah, I don't think I actually need another one. It would just be overkill. I got a decent deal on a auto winding reel of a 100-foot gardening hose, and that thing is super heavy. So, and like I don't want to actually install it or use it until I'm ready to start actually maintaining my garden outside, or my yard outside. So I just pushed the box into a spot, and I'm just gonna leave it there, and who knows, I might never install it at the current house I'm at and end up moving and then install it at the next one. And since it is just all plastic and rubber, being in an air-conditioned environment for several years should leave it to be in a fine situation. As far as YouTube content goes, I guess we should talk about that. I'm still playing PC Building Simulator. I've gotten to level 20. It convinced me to stay around for level 21 at least. At level 20, I finally unlocked the email from the Uncle Tim character who ran the shop into the ground before, jumping from offering you 10% in the first two emails of the company to now offering you another like 21%. So you're getting a higher percentage of the company, and with that 21% you would be 51% owner of the company, which would make me think that the next offer email after that, once you pay the $15,000 he wants for the business, which you've, by the time you've gotten to level 20, you've done so much work to building up the business, it's probably worth a little bit more than, well, 21% times 15,000 would be, let's see, estimating that it's somewhere around $80,000 or $90,000 business. It's probably worth a little bit more than that, $200,000, $300,000, just for the amount of business and turnaround. But you are really in PC Building Simulator not getting more than 4 or 5 jobs a day anyway, so yeah, you sit on a lot of inventory if you're not careful, which will drain your cash if you're not careful. Finally had one job that I actually had to use water cooling to get the CPU overclocked well enough to hit the speeds they wanted. That mostly I think was the case that I got a job a little earlier than I should have, and the next generation of Core i7 Intel CPUs had not come out. Had I just bought the next generation of CPUs, I wouldn't have had to overclock much at all, or at all. So yeah, even up to level 20, while water cooling unlocks at like level 19, they're not really going to give you jobs that tell you you have to water cool, custom water cool. You do occasionally get jobs that tell you to use an all-in-one water cooler, which I would recommend an all-in-one over custom water cooling, but I wouldn't really recommend either one. You can do something better and safer by just buying and building a new computer, unless you're already at the point where you have the newest of components, and then at that point you're just pushing your computer past the possibilities that you should, as far as trying to overclock things. I broke 2 CPUs by trying to overclock, so several $100s down the toilet in the game just because of overclocking, adding too much voltage while trying to overclock and get it to run. Which, yeah, that's an expensive mistake to make, and that's a great reason why I do not recommend people in the real world to ever try and overclock your CPU. Now, you're fairly safe to overclock a GPU, I think, and you're pretty safe to turn on XMP and overclock DDR4 RAM. I don't even know if XMP is going to be a thing with DDR5 RAM. But yeah, CPU, I'd say stay away from that. There'll be dragons. And boy, that sounds like I haven't really been doing anything, and I guess a big part of that is that each episode I make for PC Building Simulator goes from an hour and 20 minutes to an hour and 40 minutes long. But actually, I think I have been doing a decent amount of stuff. It's just all kind of little things, finding a step here, finding a moment there to accomplish things. I'm still occasionally watching some streaming shows, which is taking up time, and struggling to find anything interesting to watch on YouTube other than Cracking the Cryptic, which I'm still spending way too much time watching those. I am noticing that the Cracking the Cryptic episodes that I played and aired for the Cracking the Cryptic game are getting a decent amount of views. Not an amazing amount of views, but a decent amount of views. Let's look at the most wishlisted games now. And yeah, now that I have some videos actually scheduled, my channel does seem like it's back to getting a little bit more views, but it's not like I'm skyrocketing in watch time or subscribers by any means. And who knows what will happen now that school is back in, although really it shouldn't affect my views on my channel too much because I don't think kids really should be watching my channel anyways, but who knows. There is definitely a theory to be made that the vast majority of all the views on YouTube are from kids. Kids of some age, kids in maybe high school or below. But yeah, I swear I've done a little bit more. Yeah, it definitely feels like I've done a little bit more, and maybe at some point there's a small victory in just that, in that if you feel like you're accomplishing something and you feel better about it or feel good about it, there's something to that. But maybe I am just falling into delusion at some level too, and because when I now start to think about it and try to name what I did, I don't have really too much that I can name. Like I know I didn't do any laundry. I know I really haven't done any dishes. I just loaded the dishwasher before starting. Which yeah, my house has a problem in that there is not enough people living in my house for a normal living experience, in the sense that the dishwasher doesn't get run enough because there's not enough dirty dishes, which means the dishes get stinky and moldy in the dishwasher if I put them in dirty, or they will pile up in a huge pile in the sink and still probably get stinky and moldy if I don't put them in the dishwasher. But I suppose the solution there is just to be wasteful and run the dishwasher half full, which yeah, I could do that, and that's the same thing. But yeah, I just don't run the laundry that as often, although there's really no problem with not running a washing machine or dryer for a few weeks. My refrigerator, I have like one refrigerator unplugged at this point, and I've had it unplugged for months. I did smell in there and double check, and it still smells perfectly fine. There's baking soda in it, and I cleaned it out and dried it out thoroughly. Drying it out in particular is a big deal. So opening it up and smelling inside makes it smell exactly like what the inside of a refrigerator on a showroom floor that's not plugged in smells like, and it is just kind of this plasticky, stale smell that is fairly neutral. But yeah, even my other refrigerator that is plugged in, an ice machine, it makes too much ice, and that sometimes freezes over, just because there's not enough people engaging with everything. Houses inherently are not built to be under occupied, and that is the case for me at the moment, is that it is under occupied quite a bit. Let's look at this day in gaming. I did write up a suggestion email to the Tuya Smart Home people. We'll see if they respond. Last time I made suggestions, they responded, and then there was never going to be any other follow-up. But in particular, it occurred to me that a PC client app for Tuya would be very nice. This is not to say to make an app where you can control other Tuya smart devices on a PC like Windows. You can do an Android emulator to already run the Tuya Smart Life Android app on your PC if you want to do it that way. And frankly, if they were going to set that up, they might as well just have a website you can go to control the Tuya smart devices, which frankly they should have a website to do that. They do have a small website specifically to control NVR cameras and view them on PC, but it doesn't control any of the other components or elements. What I mean by a PC client device, though, is not that. It is to turn your PC into a Tuya compatible smart device. And from that, you would be able to control several things. First of all, things like turning your computer on, off, putting it to sleep, or putting it in hibernate mode. You'd have to probably run as administrator in any operating system, and I imagine this would be a Windows first application, which, yeah, that can be done. To turn on a PC, you would have to walk clients through turning on Wake on LAN through the BIOS, and you would have to have more than likely a local device that sends the Wake on LAN magic packet to wake up a PC. There's really no other way to turn on a PC. So without setting that up, that's going to be a no-go. Although on might just mean wake up, and I mean, you still probably would need to use Wake on LAN to wake up a sleeping computer or a hibernating computer as much as you would need to Wake on LAN to have it turn on completely. I don't think Wake on LAN magic packets will work through an internet service provider. I think they get filtered out. So it would have to probably be either a cell phone connected to the same network sending the packet out, or a hub of some sort repeating the signal. It'd have to be something in the same network. And then, yeah, operating systems, as far as Windows, there's ways to tell it to go to sleep or hibernate if those functions are actually capable of happening on your computer, which is mostly the case. Then other functionalities which might be hard to program again would be locking and unlocking your computer, and that would be very much operating system specific as how you program that, and that would be cool too. Being able to control the screen like it was an LED matrix and display colors. So let's say you were having a light show or something and you wanted just to use the monitor as one big light wall or a whole pattern of LEDs. That would be great. Or maybe even do like photo slideshows at certain times. But also being able to control any LEDs plugged into the inside of a computer, which there is a software called OpenRGB that is open source, so maybe you could accomplish that. An ability to make the computer play a sound, whether it's a siren alarm or just a ding when something happens, like say a doorbell gets pressed or something, could be very useful. The ability to read the temperatures that the motherboard knows. There's another open source software called Open Hardware that might very well work with that to know like the CPU, GPU temperatures. That way you maybe turn on your air conditioner higher if your computer starts getting hot, or you turn on an LED and turn it red if your computer starts getting hot. Just a lot of different automations you could integrate from those kinds of signals. You could go crazy and have a presence sensor function where whenever the mouse or keyboard is pressed, it is considered someone is on the computer, and so presence is sensed. And then if, say, a minute or whatever number you set happens and no mouse or keyboard is being pressed, then it will say that the person is away, which inherently, if you could do that, then you might be able to adjust when monitors turn on or turn off too. Which, yeah, triggering a screensaver or turning the monitors on and off, depending on the operating system, would be another functionality that would be really nice. There was 10 functionalities overall that I suggested. I'm not sure if I can remember all of them. I stopped at 10 and really snuck in an 11th one just to say, hey, computers are powerful, and one client app that could do even some of these things would be cool, to say the least. The most ambitious one would be to turn your PC's camera and microphone into a smart camera and microphone for the Tuya smart home system. So maybe there would be a reason to do that, maybe there wouldn't. But with that, you could also have motion detection if you were capable of turning the camera on and using it. I kind of feel like if they did build this, they'd be justified in charging for the app, just because it would be more niche, and because it's not really in their business plan to just make software for no reason. Tuya makes software because their partners are paying license fees to make hardware and sell hardware. Yes, I still think Tuya Smart Life is the best system out there, and nobody would ever agree with me on that, but I really do think it is just like the best system, just because there's so many pieces of hardware out there to try. So you may get like a dud piece of hardware, return it, get something that looks exactly the same, and see that that has been set up and configured or built completely way better. Whereas if you're going with something like Govee, you're just getting a tiny fraction compared to the number of Tuya devices, all made by Govee and all going to have whatever level of quality that specific Govee device has. I'm trying to remember what the other functionality was. Let's see if I can talk about it. I definitely did also debate about whether I should talk about it at all, because yeah, I just don't know if that helps or hurts, really. But yeah, I sent off the email and then I deleted the original copy stupidly. Speaking of Tuya, I also am debating, once I find one on sale, if I find anything on sale these days with tariffs and all, about getting a Bluetooth hub, Bluetooth low energy hub, because I think some of my devices that have been incompatible in the past might become compatible if all of a sudden I had a Bluetooth bridge or Bluetooth hub. And there's two of them that I would consider. One is a slightly more expensive Mose brand Tuya Bluetooth low energy mesh hub, and then the other would be a more no-name, specifically for door locks, specifically for Tuya door locks bridge, and the hope there is that somehow that would synergize with Wise, but I really don't think it would. Yeah. So that would be experimental, to say the least. The higher chances it would work with some Bluetooth Govee bulbs that I have. And I got those maybe a year or even 2 ago for Christmas and never got them hung up and never went anywhere with it. Got busy. And so yeah, I think that's all I really have to say there. Ran into a slick deal sale for a laundry basket of all things to match, or mostly match the ones I already have, and pretty good deal. Got it down to like $13 or so, $14. But it was only one per customer, so I wanted to get 3 of them, and I figure what I'll end up doing is hoping for another sale and or just paying full price, which would be about $26 for the laundry baskets. But yeah, we will see if that happens. Still shopping a ton, but getting more practical things. Not really going crazy like in the past couple of months, getting like all the Rama 1/2 stuff during the Prime Day sale or before then was a little crazy, and yeah, I haven't gone back to watch any more Rama 1/2 in weeks. And still just watching Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in the Dungeon, and season 4 of that is going in a weirder direction, much more bloody, much more violent, and also much more willing to imply toplessness while not showing actual nipples for some of the kids, some of the characters, not kids, definitely not kids. But yeah, it has become much more of a violent fantasy show than I feel like the first season really implied it was going to be. But it still really isn't the case that the main protagonist is a lecher or a playboy or anything like that, so the name is still way off. Apparently it's called Danmachi in Japanese, and I do think I've heard that name, but I would never really be able to match the Japanese name of a show and the English completely different translated name of a show. The names would have to be very similar for that to work. For instance, if like Berserk in Japanese was pronounced Berserku, I could understand that, but if Berserk was known as the man who goes berserk after being betrayed by his beloved, then yeah, that would be a much harder title to translate. Yeah. There's something certainly to be said about Is It Wrong to Pick Up Girls in a Dungeon being just much higher quality as far as fantasy shows go on Hulu, which, yeah, the Hulu thing in particular, Hulu is mostly full of really low quality fantasy shows that they push quite a bit, or brand new shows that are unfinished. Imminence in Shadow is one of those examples. And I would say most isekai is isekai trash. And that's what you mostly are seeing on Hulu too. I said in the past that in the previous episode, maybe the last one, the one before that, that Hulu is dropping its app support. I'm not 100% sure if that's really what's going to happen, or if it is just that Disney is dropping its plans that includes the branding with Hulu. So it may be, and I think this is happening at the end of 2026, so there's plenty of time anyways, but it may very well be the case that Hulu stays around for people who are just using the Hulu app, and people who are using Disney Plus just stop seeing Hulu branding, or frankly anything else could possibly happen too. The most popular video card now is the 3060. Interesting. Yeah. It's certainly interesting playing PC Building Simulator 2 now knowing, playing PC Building Simulator 1 now knowing that a PC Building Simulator 2 is an Epic Game Store exclusive and has undoubtedly newer graphics cards. Because PC Building Simulator 1, the game I'm playing, is basically topping out at the 1080 Ti, which is kind of a great time to top out at. I don't think the 2080 or the 3080 is particularly impressive. I'm not even sure that the 4080 is particularly impressive. And I think they just now are releasing 5060s. So the big assumption is that 5080 might be the next big generation leap upwards. Basically 4 generations have passed by, although it is questionable whether you really need that much processing power unless you're just trying to go to 4K or trying to do AI. The push to focus more on AI from NVIDIA in particular makes it questionable whether they're really improving that much. Otherwise, the push for ray tracing also seemed to be way overemphasized ever since ray tracing has come out, and honestly there's only been a handful of games that have used ray tracing, and I don't think it's anywhere as impressive as they tried to sell us on it. So yeah, I got to the achievement for breaking a CPU, which only 5.9% of players have done. And then I got an achievement for making the office PC as purple as possible. And then an achievement for blue screening of death while trying to overclock. And then reaching level 18. So, yeah. There are still achievements like having $1 million that feel like the only way you'd really get that is if you grinded like crazy, or if buying 100% of the company lets you get $1 million, or something weird otherwise happens. There are bespoke quests you get in the PC Building Simulator where certain characters will come back and give you jobs over and over again. And so one of the jobs that I've been doing recently is this foul-mouthed gamer bro parody of Santa Claus. So Santa Claus is playing deer hunting simulator and trying to shoot Rudolph in the game, and he's just like rage quitting and smashing up his computer a couple times. So yeah, it's a kind of funny story, but weirdly also not family friendly for what otherwise you would think would have been a pretty family friendly game. Some of the other quests are a little subversive in that you have a whole chain in which you know this kid is lying to the parents and telling them to upgrade the computer far beyond what would be needed to do homework, and telling them he's doing homework when he's really gaming on it. That happens like twice, and that is very realistic to imagine what some of the orders from coming into a computer shop would be. But yeah, there's no reason for a computer shop owner to step in the middle of that kind of family drama either, and either you take the job or you reject the job is really your only options. Otherwise, keep your mouth shut. But yeah, a foul mouth but asterisk email from Santa Claus really just comes out of nowhere. I was expecting when I first saw it was Kris Kringle or Santa Claus was going to give us a job. He was going to give us a massive amount of budget or a massive amount of labor fee, and that we would just end up with a lot of money at the end of it, just maybe even $1 million much. So the Bazaar looks something like Hearthstone as far as a card game. So let's check that out. Yeah, I feel like there's a better reception around this than I thought there would be. I figured the reception would be good. Steam Deck is back up to the second spot, but I didn't expect too many people to actually buy and play Heretic and Hex, and I would have thought it would have been more of a niche game. Yeah. Rocksmith learned to play. As far as educational games, I guess that's what it thinks I'm doing by playing PC Building Simulator, is playing a educational game, which it does have a small level of educational elements to it, but I wouldn't say a great number. Fast-paced multiplayer roguelike. Every run is a new puzzle. Choose from unique heroes, uncover powerful combos, outwit your opponents in a dynamic, ever-changing marketplace. Play at your own pace while discovering endless ways to win. Says it has a single-player element to it, but it seems to me like you probably would be mostly focused on player versus player. Well, I'm going to keep an eye on it, but what inherently is going to happen is I'll keep an eye on it, come back to it 6 months or later, find nobody is playing it, or I'll find a ton of people is playing it, and then there's a whole bunch of expansions. But you can see already there's a massive overpriced problem here, in that there's a $240 bundle and you're paying $40 just to get into the game to start. Fisher cleanup detail is near its lowest price at $3.89. That being said, I guess I have no reason to buy it at the moment. I don't think the kid who I gave a Steam Deck to is going to have time to play something like this, or would even want to play something like this. It's probably not his style of games. I'm not 100% sure there. And I don't have time to play it. And frankly, this is not really age appropriate for the kid either, just by the amount of viscera and gore and blood. So, yeah, that's an easy one to wait on. I think we probably already scrolled down this. I was just trying to see if maybe I missed point shop points, items. The kid I gave a Steam Deck to, like most kids are, is going to be going back to school. So it'll be interesting to see what his playtime looks like at that point. Although the game that he was allowed to download with the weird he can only download one game per month this month was kind of a weird one that I think his friends probably were talking about and excited about, and so I suspect it didn't really keep his attention or last. I suspected as soon as he got it, that would be the problem. So I don't think I've seen him really play that as much as he was playing Monster Hunter's Wild, which he went back to playing some of that too, which I guess the rule is that if it's already been downloaded once, then it's fine. So maybe if I had known that, maybe I should have gotten him a bigger capacity on his Steam Deck to have just more games installed. Although, honestly, I think it probably is more nuanced than that, and he can delete and re-download things he's already downloaded and played before. My thought about suggesting UFO 50 to him, which is 50 NES era kind of games, might work, but only if he really wants to just grind through 50 NES era games, some of which are arcadey and short, but not micro games or mini games, but also not 60-hour experiences each with 50 games all together. There is also a whole storyline, fake narrative happening that these are games made by a fake company for a fake PC type console. And so, yeah, there's more than likely an assumption here that UFO 50 is a collection of like Game Jam games that were done, or at least a bunch of them were done that way. Because I can't imagine somebody would actively go out of their way to make 50 games like that in just this, instead of spending efforts to just make one good game with modern graphics and modern gameplay mechanics. We're seeing several new games back on the charts for being played on Steam, the top 100 games being played on Steam. And I noticed Borderlands here, which reminds me that, yes, Gearbox's YouTube page put out a video with Randy Pitchford in Japan, definitely talking or trying to talk to a Japanese market, and half talking about his magician focus too, which that may be a major problem in general with Randy Pitchford, is that he really wants to be a magician as much as he wants to be the figurehead of Gearbox. So I kind of assume 2K sent him out there to keep him out of the way, and I mostly assume on top of that he went to Japan to feature a Japanese magician in his magician magazine. So yeah, he somewhat promoted Borderlands 4 and tried to explain Borderlands 4 in a way that I guess he thought might appeal to the Japanese audience. But yeah, I don't know if there's a specific reason why you would want Borderlands 4 to try to appeal to the Japanese audience, or you would think that you even have a chance of that. But who knows what 2K is thinking, or what Randy Pitchford is thinking. Yeah, my general idea is that they sent him out to pasture and said, here, take a trip to Japan. Okay, well, that's all the warm-up. Now, since my macros didn't run particularly correctly, we're going to go through a couple of Video Games Chronicle news articles that will be the newest ones, and then I'm going to have to jump around to find the oldest ones, so there'll be a slight delay. The Fast and Furious Arcade is coming to consoles later this year. Raw Thrills Arcade Racer is getting a home port in October. There's probably a massively long list of arcade games that are effectively locked or lost behind arcade hardware, and at no point were ever even thought that they would be ported to PC, or if they were ported to PC, it would be very much a remake or a major change. Even like the first Punch-Out arcade game is completely different from NES Punch-Out. Which there technically are 4 Punch-Out games. There is the arcade game, the NES one, there's Super Punch-Out, and then there is Punch-Out for the Wii, I believe. Let's see. Football Manager 26 announces a comeback with the first tease of in-game Unity Engine footage, in-game Unity Engine footage, although inane also might be a good way to describe it. So this is all live action footage so far, so I hate when that's the case. That's Unity footage. That's Unity footage. It's very easy to tell that's Unity footage. So they show you barely anything at all. Okay, so now that wouldn't have caught my attention much anyways because I really don't care about soccer / football. Now I need to scroll way back to the left side of my tabs and get to the spot where we have the older Video Games Chronicle articles. And look at that. The Minecraft console developer 4J opens a new Edinburgh studio as work continues on its Minecraft rival Reforge. Reforge is a voxel-based sandbox game being built alongside the Minecraft community. So apparently there was no more work to port Minecraft after making all these other ports. Let's see what Reforge looks like. It looks smoother, less sharp edges, and frankly any of these voxel based Minecraft clones all look the same when it's just building components. This one seems like it has a lot more textures that it might be putting on blocks, maybe different angles in which you can cut and arrange blocks, but that's not really what's going to interest me the most. What's going to interest me the most is what do the characters look like? Are there animals? What is the whole gameplay loop, the economic system? Is there some kind of redstone equivalent? Yeah, and we're only getting it's like brief look at characters like that, and that character in particular with their limbs not actually connected and just floating is creepy in my mind. So yeah, not really seeing anything there that would make it feel like it would be the next big thing. I'm not sure anything is ever going to replace Minecraft because a massive amount of Minecraft's success was just streamers playing it and hyping it, and now there's a lot of other games people can stream and play other than Minecraft. Plus Minecraft had probably a big boost in when it came out and when YouTube was doing less to prevent people under 13 from actually watching footage and content on YouTube, because you're supposed to be 13 or older to use YouTube. Moving on, the Sims rival Inzoe is coming to the PS5 next year. The game's first DLC will be released next week. I believe Inzoe, though, has probably just been stagnated, maybe launched too early, maybe set expectations way too high. Definitely think it's in an early access state, and I think at this point PlayStation is just letting early access state products onto their platforms. They may have been doing that for a long time now, actually. I haven't paid enough attention to it. Sony also has finalized pulling all of its business out of Russia. So like Sony Movies, Sony Pictures, Sony PlayStation Interactive. I wouldn't be surprised if Russia is seizing as much assets as possible that were in Russia under Sony's name, but I also wouldn't be surprised if there was little left of the Sony's offices in Russia to begin with. But if it's anything like McDonald's was in Russia, I imagine there's probably some Russian-run Sony company that's going to pop up, and that may very well own a bunch of the buildings and assets and things like that, and may very well have had access and capability of stealing code or stealing stuff from Sony. Which I'm not sure how much of being embargoed hurts Russia, or Russia being a somewhat bad country to do business in, probably more than somewhat bad country to do business in. I don't know how much that really affects things, whether global economics run the world as much as global politics does, or whether it's just global elites that run the world, and Sony is not big enough to be a global elite, which is interesting to say that. Moving on, Namco's 1996 arcade racer Aquajet, it gets its first ever home release this week. So this feels like this is a secondary arcade game getting released. I would kind of have to assume that maybe the licenses for games from Namco have transferred into new hands, and that might be it, the reason. Or, yeah, that would be very believable, is that somebody new is in charge, or some new company owns the rights to those games. Chibi Robo is the next GameCube title coming to the Switch 2's classic library. Tiny robot helper first made its debut 20 years ago. Inherently, I never really thought that this game would come back. I thought there was probably some license issue there, although I don't know what it would be. There have been a couple of at least started projects to make spiritual successors to Chibi Robo. I don't know if either one of those projects, though, have actually gone anywhere as far as this goes. I'd think of Chibi Robo as a predecessor to something like I Am Toast, where you're given like maybe nicer quests, and yeah, it does have very much kind of a weird Japanese thought to it too. He has to have a certain amount of energy, so he plugs himself in. But yeah, you can see how crazy it goes. It kind of feels like it's kind of a predecessor to something like Pikmin too. Games designed around being given smaller tasks, or being able to run around an open world and achieve different tasks. And I guess that was the era of more open world things. Compare that to like Ocarina of Time, where you have an open world in the center, but Ocarina of Time mostly is a linear experience going from dungeon to dungeon with some open world side quests that you can either engage with or not engage with. But I'm pretty sure I did play Chibi Robo, and I pretty sure I did enjoy it, but I'm not sure I'd really want to go back and play the original GB Robo. A new Helldivers 2 Xbox trailer seemingly teases a Halo crossover. PlayStation Studios title is coming to Xbox Series X and S later this month. I think PlayStation has pretty much admitted that they're done with exclusives. Although that may just mean that they're going to put everything on PC that they can, more than they put it on the Xbox. Tekken Tag Tournament 3, probably not in my working lifetime, says Harada. The Tekken boss says it's more likely that a tag mode could be added to a main entry in the series. Which, in fairness, yes, it does. On the surface of it, me not really knowing what Tekken Tag Tournament 2 was, it makes a lot more sense for them to add more modes to Tekken 8 and try and get more people to play the main game than to split it off into two different separate games. Of course, the problem with Tekken, I think, is it's just not a game that's played as much as people as they would like it to be played, and I don't think its character selection is particularly that interesting, which I'm not sure any of the character selections are that interesting. It is kind of a sad statement that Smash Brothers has the most interesting characters of the character set of any game that is even close to a fighting game, and Smash Brothers really isn't a fighting game. And perhaps that is that highlights a need there, where there needs to be several single-player games that introduce characters and have players learn to love those characters before you make a fighting game with them. And yeah, if Platinum was big enough, I could see something like that happening, where you would have characters like Bayonetta, and then you'd need a dozen more characters, basically, all show up in a fighting game, tournament, spin-off game. Yeah, I'm trying to think of any company that could really do that. Ubisoft would be big enough, but it would just be a whole bunch of Assassin's Creed characters fighting each other, and Assassin's Creed characters fighting each other would be weird. Nintendo obviously does do it. Nintendo could make a proper fighting game with its characters, but it would be weird if they did. EA probably owns enough back catalog to do something like that, where that would make sense. And Microsoft has acquired enough companies where that would make a lot of sense too. You could have characters come up from Microsoft companies and fight each other, and perhaps that is where the Smash Brothers clones should go, is to be more of a realistic fighter. But I suppose it is no surprise that Marvel and DC characters are so often recognizable in fighting games too, and added to fighting games. It's because you have decades upon decades of characters development where you can throw in some weird Marvel character and somebody will know them and somebody will care about them, whereas in Tekken I think considerably fewer people will know the characters and care about them. Moving on, Senua's Saga Hellblade 2 Enhanced is out now for the PS5 with a free update for Xbox and PC. The PS5 Deluxe Edition of the game also includes an upgraded PS5 version of the first Hellblade. Interesting. Deluxe Edition includes both games. So I would assume the graphics look better. Which the graphics already looked way fine. Way too good in the Hellblade series. And I would assume that nothing is being touched or changed to the gameplay, what little gameplay there actually is in Hellblade, which I don't think there really is that much. inherently, I would still really wish that this company would just become the trailer maker studio or the cutscene studio, probably both, for every other game that Microsoft makes, and just say, hey, you guys love these, you love the focus on visuals, do that and make that our new Microsoft style, that anything published by Microsoft or a Microsoft subsidiary is going to have this style. The next Elder Scrolls game in particular, if it had a trailer like this, if it had cutscenes at all, which would be interesting if it did have cutscenes and they looked like that, that would be just like a generational leap in quality. Whereas the next Elder Scrolls game, if it even gets made and released, is still going to probably be very cartoony compared to the hyper realistic, more natural color tones that you see in Hellblade games. Let's see. Moving on, this year's Gamescom will have more than 1,500 exhibitors for the first time. The show floor will also take up a record high of 233,000 square meters, which, yeah, that's hard to translate into anything somebody in the United States would recognize. But yeah, there is a, seems like Gamescom is going to be bigger, which makes a lot of sense. I think Gamescom is going to be taking up a lot of the slack for the lack of E3s. I don't think all of the directs alone are directly replacing E3s. Vegas is falling apart financially, I suspect, by the end of this decade. And so I don't think we're going to see any big events there. LA Convention Center, probably also fairly expensive too. So I think Gamescom may very well just become the new E3, and somewhat deservedly so. And one would hope that they maybe just do things a little bit differently, a little bit better. Yeah. This isn't video game related, but I was suggested an interesting video on YouTube, which is like She Sells Seashells by the Seashore. I probably didn't pronounce any of that correctly. In an animated rap form. And it is, I think, based on a song called Money Theory Part 2 or something like that, which I've never heard of this. And it is very much the idea of what would you do, or what would someone do if they were selling seashells by the seashore, but then they became a ultra capitalist mogul around it and was expanding and expanding and expanding and becoming super rich by it. Yeah, and it's a takedown on greed and commercialism and capitalism, basically. But funny to see that in like a rap form while also being animated. I wouldn't say the animation was particularly great, but that was a weird video that YouTube suggested to me, and I wish YouTube would suggest more weird videos to me. Just random stuff if you've got nothing else, because I tell you, how many times does it want me just to watch the same rerun of Taskmaster or another Cracking the Cryptic video? That's like 60% of what it suggests to me. It's just stuff I've already seen. Moving on, the Tekken boss Harada says he'd like to show people the 30% complete Tekken X Street Fighter one day. The game was originally announced 15 years ago. 30% complete may mean a lot of different things, because 30% complete in a vertical mentality might mean that there's all of the characters and then 30% of the levels, or if you were to graph it out on a horizontal the other direction, it might be 30% of the characters and all the levels, or it could be any in between part too. It could be that 30% of all the gameplay fighting mechanics are done, or it could be 30% of the textures are done. So 30% regardless is not a significant amount. So whatever he would show would have to be really edited it out into like a video to display it, and not an actual interactable demo or anything like that. And yeah, it's a shame that these things don't just go public domain, and then if anybody actually cares, you'd have somebody work in an open source way to finish a 30% complete game. But yeah, it never happens. The laws are not written in a way to make it easy. It may literally just be impossible to say, hey, we're abandoning this game and thus we're making it the code public domain for everybody to work on and do whatever they want with it. Moving on, Monster Hunter Wild's PC performance will continue to get updates beyond winter as Capcom proceeds with caution. Director Yuya Tokuda says the team is trying to reduce CPU load without affecting performance. So they are, I guess, effectively teaching themselves how to optimize their code for PC, considering how they've mostly been focused on making PlayStation versions first in their previous games. But yeah, that's Monster Hunter Wilds, the one that is reviewed poorly. The kid that I got a Steam Deck for is playing Monster Hunter World, the game before that, which was received overwhelmingly positively. Yeah. We see a lot of layoffs right now of skilled laborers, skilled programmers in the video game industry, which is inevitably going to lead to brain drain. You see Microsoft in particular really pushing AI. Most of the companies trying to push AI to lay off more people, which is going to lead to brain drain. But honestly, there's already been at least one instance before in the gaming industry that there's been major brain drain. The people who figured out how to program NES games and Atari games, the people who probably by modern standards should be considered genius at programmers, because they were doing everything the hard way without assistance in libraries that wouldn't have existed at the time. Most of those people were either promoted up to management outside of their actual best position to be in, or retired, or died, or left the gaming industry completely. You know, there's a long history of programmers, most of which aren't named, that left and probably didn't leave to teach, and probably didn't pass on as much knowledge as they could have to another generation of programmers. And certainly nowadays, where people think AI or vibe coding is acceptable, I think there is going to be a lot of very deluded kids who think that they can be video game programmers that are going to graduate from high school and find out that they can't get a job anywhere, let alone as a coder, and that their vibe coding skills is not in any way going to be impressive. Hiring people in particular have a habit of not really caring about how impressive you are anyways. They want to make you feel desperate and devalue you so that you will take a lowball offer more often than not. Anyways, back to Video Game Chronicle articles. Epic says Fortnite and Epic Game Store will be coming to iOS in Australia following a court ruling. It's the latest region to find Apple's actions anti-competitive, following the EU, the US, and Japan. So, it seems like Epic Game Store is going to show up on Android and iOS, basically everywhere. Fortnite has not been as easy to install and play for years on those platforms, and yet people still are installing it and playing it to some level, although I wouldn't be surprised if there isn't a major boost in its player numbers. I wouldn't be surprised if it just stays about the same. Let's see, and then this looks like our last Video Games Chronicle article. Remedy was unsatisfied with FBC Firebreak's launch sales, but says it has a solid game to build on. Publisher says the launch underperformed, but player feedback is getting more positive. Interesting, because I don't recall it even coming out. Game currently scores 63, mixed on Steam as far as user reviews. I feel like a big reason why FBC Firebreak was always kind of doomed to fail is it just doesn't really make a lot of sense to try to make a multiplayer experience in the Control universe. It definitely seems like they were just being silly by even trying that. Okay. So, before I do anything else, I'm going to take just a second to stand up and fluff my seat cushions. So I'm going to be right back. Okay, sorry about that. Yeah, my seat cushions are going flat today. I don't know why. So this is a Gematsu article now. We'll go through these and then we'll probably have to jump around some more, I guess, later. A fast-paced first-person shooter called Vex Mage has been announced for PC and Quest, which this is the first time I think we've had anything announced for Quest in months. Oh, it's probably not been months, but everything that gets announced for VR tends to be fairly boring. And inherently anything that is VR compatible feels like it's always compromised, even if there is a non-VR version. So, yeah. Even this looks like it might not be as much as you might want it to be. So, none of these things activated to open their links automatically. Hidden Memories of the Gardens Between is now available for PSVR 2. It must have been a VR presentation of some sort, although I'm not sure what it would be. This is on Steam, but also is a VR game, so I'll move that over to that spot. Again, this looks like this might have been an interesting kind of point and click game that instead is a hidden object game in VR. I remember this one. Where there's these like giant objects. Let's see. We can show what it is. Yeah, working your way around an island with a whole bunch of objects. Very surreal. Yeah. Again, this might have been a decent game, and it might still be a decent game, but it's going to get very few reviews because it's VR only. Moving on, Double Dragon Gaiden, Rise of the Dragons free DLC character Evil Marianne and Super Anubis is now available. I don't know either one of those characters, but I also don't really know anything about Double Dragon, so we'll leave it at that. Double Dragon Gaiden, though, definitely feels like it's better animated, or it's a better animation style to pick as a beat-em-up game compared to the other Double Dragon game that's being developed, where the graphics look very off. I wouldn't even say these graphics look really on model for what Double Dragon games have looked like in the past. I'm not going to make a YouTube short, however, on games that just add expansions. Chip and Claws versus the Brainoids launches August 26, according to Nikamatsu. Okay. Detective VR is coming to PSVR 2 and Steam VR spring 2026. In spring 2026. Again, I wonder if some of the talents that made in the past 3D CGI porn games are now all of a sudden going to be making games like this. Although this looks lower quality than what you would see as far as 3D CGI porn animations and asset flips, which I don't think it's so much asset flipping as it is just starting with good levels of 3D models of characters and then really focusing on the appearance of those characters for an adult game. Oh, which by the way, Valve, because I imagine of the local laws in those countries, has stopped accepting PayPal in several countries, basically every country except for, I think, maybe the US, England, Japan, but definitely not the US. So PayPal is still accepted on Steam in the US at the moment. But yeah, it's stopped being accepted completely in other countries. And that may have more to do with PayPal being acquired by some other company or changing how they're doing their international banking than any real censorship thing. But it definitely is more evidence that companies like Steam in particular are going to have to start accepting something like Bitcoin or some other kind of credit card service that we can start this whole cycle again to go against PayPal, Stripe, Visa, and MasterCard, which, yeah, there's been an allowance of consolidation and a lack of regulation on banking systems and payment processors, which has led to this problem in part. Moving on, though, Mandragora, Whispers of the Witch Tree for the Switch launches September 4th. It's currently already available for the PS5, the Xbox Series, and PC. You can see it's overall mixed here. mostly positive in the last 30 days. So it's kind of on the edge. This doesn't look absolutely awful as a game, but it must be lacking in gameplay polished. Things. Yeah. So it feels like this is just not the greatest of the great of whatever kind of Castlevania game you might expect this to be like. And so I will click this to say I've seen it. But I'm not even going to bother to make a YouTube short on it. Instead, we'll move on. A first-person psychological horror game called Haunted Bloodlines launches Q4 for 2025 for the PS5 and PC. The crazy faces there. I talked about in the last stream a movie called Weapons, and the trailer in that has like a dream sequence where a character has a crazy face, like clown makeup type thing. I've since had a YouTuber watch a YouTube video that has spoiled me on the movie, and yeah, I think my idea about what they would have done with it would have been more interesting than what they did do with it. And yeah, it seems like the movie Weapons is something that maybe people will sing the praises of more than regular moviegoers will actually go and watch or enjoy. Although maybe the fact that I won't enjoy the movie really does imply that other people might. Well, yeah, it looks like there might be something in this horror game. I can't just immediately dismiss it, but it is a shame that horror games really at this point on Steam are so similar that there just really isn't a way of knowing which ones are actually good until they come out and have many reviews. This one hasn't come out yet. Wizard of Legend 2 is coming to the Switch in 2025. You can see Wizard of Legend is mostly negative. Wizard of Legend 2 is mostly negative in the last 30 days and only 56% positive overall. So it coming out to new consoles probably isn't going to help anything. Control sales have topped 5 million. Control 2 and Max Payne 1 and 2 development is progressing. Control development is now focused on gameplay, environments, and missions. I guess it is a question as far as do I want to buy Control 2 and play it. I don't know if I really do. Like, I definitely would hold back on it and wait, as it were. I must pick this up during a Steam sale because the original version of Control I had was not on Steam, which it would be interesting to see how like a Steam Deck could handle playing Control, but I don't want to play Control again. But yeah, I suppose if people were singing the praises of Control 2 and really convinced me to go back and play it, I'd be willing to do it. But frankly, I don't think I would volunteer to do it otherwise. I'd have to be pressured into it. But yeah, there is a certain possibility there that if for some reason I was working for like a YouTube Giant Bomb equivalent where there is an editor and the editor was assigning me jobs, I might appreciate just being forced to play some games I wouldn't otherwise play, but only to a certain level, and that certainly would just make this YouTube job even more of a job and more of a grind. But yeah, if there was some kind of YouTube giant bomb equivalent, I don't know why they would hire me, and I don't know if they could actually ever afford to pay people. We hear things like DF Retro and Giant Bomb going independent, but we don't see any evidence of them actually making a significant amount of money just on YouTube ad revenue. They all seem to have to push for Patreons, and immediately they want to grow and do more things. So maybe they have some money coming in, but it's probably not as much as they'd like. Anyways, continuing through the Gematsu articles, the side-scrolling platformer Dunkadillo has been announced for Switch, PC, iOS, and Android. Interesting. No Steam Link yet. Capcom Platinum titles update as of June 30th. Big moments for Devil May Cry and Resident Evil series. Which 10.5 million units, 1.4 million since the last update for Devil May Cry 5. Village has sold 900,000 since March 31st. So yeah, big numbers still for the top tier Capcom characters. I guess maybe that would be one. If Capcom took all the Resident Evil characters and made a fighting game around that, that would work fairly well. You could certainly have all of your Chris Redfields and Leon S. Kennedys and all the bad guys characters fight. And then you could put a twist on it to make it more zombie Resident Evil like. It makes a lot more sense to make a Resident Evil fighting game than it does to make a second or third player versus player live service Resident Evil game. And certainly you could have some crossover characters like the Dead Rising characters from a same zombie kind of concept, or Mega Man or Dante and other characters from Devil May Cry. I'm not sure if Capcom has enough characters specifically to do a Smash Brothers type game, but they could probably make a small version of that. I don't know if a small version would sell, though. The Korean fantasy action adventure game Wuchi the Wayfarer has been announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and PC. Some of these might be articles we had already talked about. For instance, Blippo here is one I know we talked about, launching September 23rd. Very weird looking game, and I do love the occasional weird looking game. And then Digimon Story Time Stranger has a new Digiride trailer if you want to watch that on Gematsu. Okay, so before I jump to the Gaming on Linux articles, I'm going to scroll forward on my tabs and see whether their Gematsu articles are open. It might be that there's a bunch of redundant Gematsu articles, or it might be there's a bunch of old Gematsu articles. Yeah. Robots at Midnight is coming to the PS5 on August 28th. So we're going to have all kinds of tabs in different ways. This is where it's going to get really messy. Crimson Desert has been delayed to Q1 of 2026. Okay. Nintendo GameCube, Nintendo Classic adds Chibi Robo on August 21st. No telling why there are just random games in between each of these articles. Lollipop Chainsaw Repop sales have topped 300,000, which is probably a massive number, and 300,000 is like the big number you want to start celebrating. If you're below that, a special project is being prepared for its first anniversary. But I mean, you've got a niche game here, and I'm surprised that Lollipop Chainsaw hasn't just been caught up in censorship. Although, if you know anything about the game, it's kind of hard to say that Juliet, as the main female protagonist, is being exploited too much, other than the fact that she as a character is depicted as choosing to dress in a scantily clad, pornified version of a high school cheerleading outfit. But yeah, I'm surprised how much this game in particular has managed to avoid either censoring itself or being censored by other people. But I never really could expect it to go much more in sales numbers. I wish people would put their money where their mouth is, though, and invest in games like this just to support the art form and people's desire to make lewd games, which is basically all this is a lewd game. But yeah, I wasn't ever really expecting a major reverse boycott. Speaking of boycotts, late last night I heard something about some YouTube boycott. I saw on Reddit one post that said there's a YouTube boycott for today. If I get no views today, that would be pretty average for me, so I won't really be able to know one way or the other. I have no idea what the boycott is about. It's definitely not a long-term boycott from the sounds of it, which there would have to be weeks, if not months, of people in mass boycotting YouTube before they really cared. So whatever the reason is for the boycott, I would have to know before I would even have been able to react to it. So they've just done a really poor job of making people aware of it, and I'm kind of habitually online, and if I barely heard about it, then I imagine most people haven't heard about it. Oh, by the way, in a previous episode I said there was a Reddit post that said the player base has dropped by 98% on the Battlefield 6 beta. It was a joke post, I found out later, because the open beta had ended and it only lasted for the weekend. So at the end of that weekend, 98% of players were booted out and couldn't play the game if they wanted to or not. And I assume 2% of more of the closed beta testers were left in. So yeah, a bit of joke post / fake news there. Here we can see that Lollipop Chainsaw is rated 87% positive, 92% positive in the last 30 days. There's a new Lollipop Chainsaw game being made, which is great news. And the hope is that the quality of the actual gameplay mechanics and gameplay is just going to be better in the next one. Not that it's absolutely terrible in the first game, but it isn't great. Yeah. It's much more about the flash. Yeah. It's a beat 'em up combo type game. which is also kind of an older style of game anyways. Yeah, and I'll just leave it at that. There's nothing more to really say. Church simulator. Oh, I could think of so many ways that could go wrong. And yeah. Seems like this is a funeral being held with candles. Yeah, I'm not sure what kind of church this would be with this kind of arrangement, this kind of frock or outfit for the priest, candles, a casket being brought in while people are in the pews, the way they're holding their hands. Yeah. This definitely feels like this is going to be at least low quality, probably a meme joke game, and a mean meme joke game more than likely. Moving on, a party action game called Lappy Games is launching August 20th for the Switch and August 27th for the PC. Okay. What's going to happen is I'm going to end up going through these games a second time. In Zoe is coming to the PS5 in early 2026. Not really sure why this one is tagged with sexual content. In the last 30 days, you can see in Zoe it's 47% positive. Or it's been 76% positive overall. Yeah. So I'm still just kind of waiting to see if this game gets polished when it actually comes out of early access, or if it just gets abandoned, which is also very much a possibility. Arcade Archives Aquajet announced for PS5, Xbox Series, Switch 2. I think we had already talked about this one. Let's see. Instinct 3 establishes an indie game studio called Sidekick Publishing. Deadly Days Road Trip is the first title slated under the label. Here we can see this game on Steam. Doesn't look like much. Forge of the Fae is going to be published by Deck 13 Spotlight. Looks like it might be a somewhat polished RPG Maker type game. It has a little bit more polish to it. Right. And then there are several more games here that are open. I'm just not sure why they're open. Hand-drawn black and white dungeon RPG, The Secret of Weepstone, announced for PC. There we go. That looks interesting enough to put on the follow list. PlayStation Plus game catalog and classics catalog lineup for August 2025 have been announced. Looks like it's Atelier Ryzen 3, Coral Island, Earth Defense Force 6, Herald, Halibut, Indica, Marvel Spider-Man, Mortal Kombat, Sword of the Sea, Unicorn Overlord. Yeah. So if this is the first time Spider-Man has been on PlayStation Plus, people would have had to have waited a very long time to play Spider-Man Remastered. I assume this is Spider-Man Remastered and not the original version. But yeah, I just don't know what else you'd be playing. I'd have to think that the number of people that have PlayStation Plus is very high compared to the number of people who have PlayStations in general. Just because well, no, actually, it could be very low because it might be the case that people buy a PlayStation 5, then buy games like Spider-Man, and then play Spider-Man, and then wait several months before another game catches their fancy and to buy. And so yeah, I wouldn't be surprised if actually there's a lot of people that have PlayStation 5s, PlayStation 4s, and they just buy like 1 or 2 games every year, less than even the average 3. Although I don't know if that's still the average. Moving on, Fast and Furious Arcade Edition has been announced for the PS4, Xbox Series, and Switch. Which, okay. Doesn't seem like it is coming to Steam, however, or PC. Postal Brain Damage DLC These Sunny Days launches September 9th for PC and later in 2025 for PS4 and PS5. Yeah. Okay. I don't think I'd ever end up playing Postal at this point. I think it's kind of just silly and pointless of a game, so this doesn't really interest me too much, nor do I think I'd make a YouTube short on it, so leave it at that. PUBG Battlegrounds for the PS5 and Xbox One is going to end service on November 13th alongside PS5 and Xbox Series launch. Existing account data and purchase items will carry over. So if you're still playing PUBG, then you are having to hope you have a PS5 or an Xbox Series, which I imagine if you were still playing on an Xbox One or a PS4, PUBG might have been the only game you were playing on those consoles, and so those consoles may have lost a lot of value. Clover Pit launches September 13th, is a demonic love child between Balerto and Buckshot Roulette, is how they're describing it. To me, it looks like it is a slot machine simulator with several other elements, and definitely feels like there is a demonic level to all of this. Interesting. I'll keep an eye on that. Lego Voyagers launches September 15th. It's the cooperative adventure game. We are hoping it is good. The previous game from this developer had some failings, in my opinion, because it was just like there was a lot of dark scenes. There was a lot of scenes where you were doing very little, just getting from point A to point B, and while it sold itself as looking very pretty, it didn't really have much of a game other than having this like ray tracing shininess to its appearance. Yeah. I would be cautious to expect much more than what you see in the trailer in this game. This may be very short, like a 5-hour game at most, and what you see may very well be what you get in the trailer and nothing more. Now my hope would be that this is like 5 times better, 5 times longer than the previous game of this style. It's online co-op, however, also, so I don't think I'd be able to play it. Because yeah, I don't have anybody that could play with me and have the same crazy hours I keep, which are just completely inconsistent. And yeah, so I may never actually get around to that. It may be one more Lego game not for me. But yeah, I definitely have to question how much of a Lego fan I should really be, as I'm boxing up Lego sets and very possibly should just not unbox them. Davy X Jones launches in early access on PC on August 28th. Okay. This is the next Gematsu game. Might be something interesting in that one. Football Manager 26 announced. The most immersive and visually rich Football Manager experience yet is the quote. R-Type Delta HD Boosted launches November 20th in the West, which is, I guess, a new release of R-Type Delta, I would assume, and not just a completely brand new game. Let's see. Zoochosis for PS4 and 5 launches August 25th alongside a major update. This is a creepy horror game. Mostly positive in the last 30 days, but overall not particularly positive. So, unless a major update fixes the problems with it, I think this is one that wouldn't make it to the fall list, at least. Snoopy and the Great Mystery Club announced for PS5, Xbox Series, and Switch in PC. This is the new way Snoopy is being depicted, and all of the Peanuts characters are being depicted, for the most part, in that they are these very chibi-like, if a Westerner was doing chibi art styles with giant heads. Arguably maybe closer to even Funko Pop, although Funko Pops are more like square heads. But yeah, it's all CGI. It's all nowhere close to the comic strip or the hand animation of the movies from many decades ago. Yeah. And it looks like the bird here may be animated in a fairly different direction too. There's a real question about whether Peanuts characters are relevant at all. And we've seen several games trying to play on a nostalgia for things that parents of a previous generation were nostalgic for. Like, most people alive today only know of Snoopy because their parents sat them down and made them watch the Peanuts Snoopy movies, because they were on TV during a time when nothing else would have been on TV more than anything. But most people today did not read Peanuts comics when they were coming out in the comics or anything like that. So there is a major question about relevancy around Peanuts and several other brands that are just as old. Even Garfield at this point is questionable. If you asked a 10-year-old today, do you know Garfield the cat? They may go, nope, never heard of him. Who is that? And rightfully so, I guess. Last Gematsu article, it looks like, is the Thai folklore horror adventure game Kumarn. The Wandering Spirit has been announced for consoles and PC. I feel like this game was already announced, though. Guess not. Interesting. So I must be thinking of a different game. Alright, well, that's going to bring us to Gaming on Linux, which is going to bring me to an opportunity to take a break, because I really need one. So I'll be back in maybe 10 minutes or so. Be right back. Okay, I'm back. Sorry about that. Something about today in particular has just really led to me being very uncomfortable in this chair. Just maybe a little bit of back pain or something, and it's not like I've done anything physical to justify any of that. But yeah. And what's funny about that is today is probably the first day where I haven't just had a massive amount of coughing happen there. I just coughed probably because I subconsciously thought about coughing, but nowhere is bad. Nowhere is much congestion. So I don't know if I've moved into a different phase or what, as far as that cough, or maybe I'm just getting one day off and then tomorrow it will be bad again. Again, I'm coughing because I'm thinking about coughing more than I'm having the horrific coughing that I had before. Alright, so we're going to go through Gaming on Linux articles, which is going to require me to scroll back quite a bit. And I'm not sure we even have any GameDeveloper.com articles. Oh, it looks like we may have actually quite a few. Okay. So what have we got? You can go on the hunt for a simple Pilsner in the world full of craft beer. In Dude, Where's My Beer? A new hop. Okay. Sounds... What is the right word for beer fans? Well, it looks like a point and click around beer. It's an interesting thought, certainly, and I do love point and click, so I'll put that on the follow list. Next, Nexus Mods app 0.15.2 brings updated improvements and more bug fixes. Is this the official Nexus Mods app? I believe it is. G Proton 10-12 hotfix adds a few more needed tweaks for video playback in Ghostwire Tokyo, Castlevania Dominus Collection, possibly other games that use WebM VP8 and VP9 videos. Maybe it was just a case that I spoke too soon, and as it's getting later in the evening, maybe that's when the coughing starts to really kick up, is after I've been upright and sitting for a while. The NVIDIA 580.76.05 has been released as far as NVIDIA drivers, with as the new recommended stable driver, updating several inside baseball things. Yeah. I saw a YouTube video talking about, frankly, how difficult it is to just sleep for 5 seconds in a pure C++ program, one that isn't going to use a library or a system call, which would inherently integrate it into something like Windows. Which, yeah, it probably is a library that is on most platforms, whether that's Windows or BSD or Mac OS or Android or something like that. In a funny way, my solution to making a program that you would want to sleep for 5 minutes before triggering something would be to probably make it in the Godot engine and use all of the built-in functionality and code of the Godot engine to make it multi-platform. Of course, that's not pure C++ by any means. My other solution, my first knee-jerk solution, would be to write individual system calls for individual operating systems. So have a Windows version of the code and a Linux version of the code and a Mac OS version of the code, which That seems like that's a lot of work. Weirdly, embedded ESP32 programming is not unlike that problem, in that you want it to go in a loop, and by default it always is going in a main loop, so you don't want it just to pause the system and sleep for 5 seconds. You want it to be able to do other things, and then once 5 seconds have passed, activate something. So you just instead have it loop around and increment a counter or test the number of seconds that have happened. And some of the ESP32s have timers in them specifically, so you can set different alarms, but even that is very complicated, like most embedded programming is. And embedded programming is not even C++, it's more C without the pluses. But yeah, you would think that on some very low level, and there probably is, there's some AMD 64, Intel 86 standard way of invoking the CPU to sleep for 5 seconds or call back after 5 seconds have happened or some amount of time has happened, but I'm not sure that there really is that either. Anyways, back to gaming on Linux articles. I'm rambling here. Postal 2 Redux has launched a Kickstarter, gathering funds to make the enhanced Unity rebuild of the classic divisive game. Interesting. Yeah, I guess on top of just being uncomfortable in the chair, I'm not as awake or prepared to be streaming today. Not feeling it as much as I probably should. Rising Heat aims to be the next evolution of Horde survival twin stick shooters. Which, yeah. At any point, if I was to play Vampire Survivors, there would be some new Vampire Survivors clone game out there that I would have a good argument of playing. Assuming I actually liked Vampire Survivors and wanted to play more of it. I don't know if it would get me any views, or if it would be particularly fun to play 2 twin stick top down roguelike shooters in a row. Senua's Saga's Hellblade gets Steam Deck verified with an enhanced update out now. Interesting. This perhaps is the best argument yet that the Steam Deck doesn't need a new version of itself. I was listening to people talk about the thoughts of whether it's time for a new Steam Deck or not, and the constant talking of it always implies that there are people who would want it, but it's not like adoption has been huge or at the moment. I would much prefer to have the Steam Deck OLEDs be available in every single Walmart electronics section than for them to announce a Steam Deck 2. And my thought on what they should do with the Steam Deck 2 is really just go from Zen 2 to Zen 3 architecture, just like one generational leap, and still be behind and do just like a really incremental improvement while maintaining just about the same battery life. And probably would make more sense to go from Zen 2 to Zen 4 at that point and skip Zen 3 altogether. But then a lot of that, if you're just doing incremental improvements or hardware improvements, is already being handled by things like the Lenovo Legion Go S, where you see experiments happen there. Which, yes, it was PC World talking about a Steam Deck 2, and they were saying that some of the Lenovo Legion Go S's are going down on sale for $500, at which point it does make it a decent offering. But yeah, the fact that a super pretty game like this can be Steam Deck verified says quite a lot. The incremental improvement I also would like to see on the Steam Deck is for them to just target 1080p as a native resolution on the screen instead of 1280 by 800, which is basically 800p. That might exactly be 800p actually. So yeah, if they can get to 1080p 60 frames per second for big fancy games like this, that would be more than a small incremental improvement while maintaining the same battery life. And that's a big deal. Is battery life just comes into big play. There's kind of no point in making a new device that will probably be $100 more expensive if it has half the battery life and a whole bunch of power that may not really be necessary, considering most people playing games on the Steam Deck probably aren't trying to push the games to the extreme levels of graphics or play very complicated games that would need a lot of CPU. Moving on, Repterra is a base building survival real-time strategy set in a world overrun by dinosaurs. Interesting concept, I suppose, at some level, but it does often feel like some of these games just add dinosaurs for no reason. And I'm not sure kids these days are super into dinosaurs. It may be a small fad that happens for like 6-year-olds or something, that they'll be into dinosaurs for 6 months to a year, but I don't think it sticks around and stays like it may have in the past. Gaming on Linux says use bombs creatively to progress in the puzzle platformer Metroidvania called Ooh. I assume is something close to how it's pronounced. Actually want to see how this plays out. So I'm going to click on the video. Overwhelmingly positive. Okay, so it seems to me like you are not affected by bombs, and you don't have like a health bar. Seems like you are part of the bombs. Okay, gonna go ahead and add that to the wish list. So you're just flinging yourself around. Linux Mint version 22.2 beta is available for the next long-term supported release. It comes with Linux kernel 6.14 built on top of Ubuntu 24.04, which is Noble is the name of that version. Mint team will continue to release new versions of Linux Mint with the same base packages, making it easier to upgrade. There definitely was a point where Linux Mint would have been the recommended operating system when going from like Windows 7 to Windows 10 was such a nightmare, and we now miss the good old days of going from Windows 7 to being forced into Windows 10 now that we're being forced into Windows 11. But yeah, I can't really recommend Linux Mint at this point, unless you just want something slightly newer than Debian and didn't want to use Ubuntu. But yeah, they may be showing Steam here in the software manager package as this is just advertising Steam, but it would not be the operating system I would pick if I was going to game. And since gaming is the #1 thing I do on my computers, Bakelite Linux makes a lot more sense. A webcam-based 6 Degrees of Freedom head and eye tracking app called Look Pilot has been released on Steam. Interesting. So it's a software thing. let's see how it works. So you basically have something looking at your webcam, and then the game integrates that into pressing some kind of buttons to change your appearance, change what you're looking at, assuming you have a game that changes your view. It may be telling that the game they just depicted there as far as a shooter is not one that's recognizable, and that what they're showing here are truck simulator and pilot simulator type experiences. So yeah, while this is an intriguing bit of software, it may not be worth the $10 for most people. It may be screwing around with settings quite a bit. And yeah, you would have to have a webcam on your face the whole time. As a YouTube content creator, I imagine I would have very little use for that. I would be turning my head all the time to look at my second monitors, and it would be just really a weird thing. If I was going to do that, I would probably use some kind of VTuber software instead. Now, should I make YouTube shorts for software? It happens so rarely, I might as well say yes in that case. You can smash everything with your balls in Ball X Pit, releasing October 15th. Which, yeah, you could take that as a dirty joke if you wanted to. Let's see, next we have the School Life Tactics RPG Demon School is releasing September 3rd. Right. With that, we jumped immediately into the GameDeveloper.com articles, and so we'll just go through these. We would be in development for 30 years. Crafton reiterates the Unknown Worlds founders abandoned, quote unquote. Yeah, so there's a lot of war of words going on, it seems, still between this whole lawsuit. Yeah, and I think I'll just leave it at that. I want to see this actually end up going to court, if it ever does, before we even begin to think we're going to get the truth of the situation. Perhaps that statement indicates that the former leaders were perhaps trying to rush the release of the game. The Blizzard story and franchise development team has unionized. With the union, we're able to preserve what makes this place special. Interesting. Although it's questionable just how much of the story and franchise team is the people that once made great stories for Diablo and Warcraft, World of Warcraft, or if the story and franchise team here is just the remnants and the last few people. But yeah, this is almost certainly the reason why there's been so many layoffs at Microsoft too, is that they just figured the unionization was coming and they weren't going to be able to fight it, so let's just lay off as many people as possible before that happens. Which, yeah, see, that would be my guess as to part of the reason for the layoffs, at least. An AI-enabled game tech dev called Felicity Games is going to open a Singapore office. The company plans to invest $1 million over the next 12 to 18 months to deepen marketplace penetration across the Asian Pacific something. APAC. Area of Commerce, maybe is what it stands for. Microsoft has no place being an accomplice to genocide, quote unquote. The arcane union workers demand Xbox make severe something. All the headlines from game developer now are getting longer and longer. Arcane Studios' STJ section in France has published an open letter in support of the Palestinian-led BDS movement. I don't know what the Palestinian-led BDS movement is. Boycott, divestment, sanctions movement. Let's see. So yeah, the Israel-Palestine conflict, if you can even really call it that, is continuing, and people around the world are not happy with mostly Israel in this case. Of course, all kinds of crazy things are happening all over the world all the time, but even nowadays more often it feels like. Xzola enables direct-to-consumer monetization SDK for Unity devs. The company says the SDK will allow Unity devs to operate on their own terms without giving up flexibility or global reach. Interesting. So this may be a new payment processor that maybe if you make a Unity app would help you process payments and monetize while not also being under the thumb of Xzola, although you probably still are under the thumb of Xzola as far as what they would accept. We'll see if all of a sudden a bunch of porn games start to try and monetize by making Unity porn games and using this Xzola software development kit. We'll see how well they respond to that. Fortnite and Epic Games Store is heading to iOS in Australia following a federal court ruling. Australian federal court ruling, I would assume. We already talked about that. All of these tabs are having to reload because I had to close Firefox and restart it because it locked up. The Lineage developer NCSoft establishes an AI-driven casual mobile division, which I'm sure that's going to produce nothing but AI slop. So, a lot of GameDeveloper.com articles today. Tencent coincidentally tweaks its Steam page for Light of Moturam after the Sony lawsuit. Mentions of colossal machines and mech animals have been removed alongside some promotional images and trailers. Well, the changing of things or destruction of evidence or hiding of evidence does seem to imply guilt, which is kind of a shame because I kind of was hoping Tencent was going to just try and actually fight Sony on this and prove that most of the concepts in Horizon are not that unique and shouldn't really be copyrightable. Diablo boss Rod Ferguson is going to depart Blizzard after 5 years. Quote, I'm extremely grateful for the honor of playing some small part in this extraordinary franchise. Of course, you have to remember that the last 5 years of Diablo would be not the best parts of Diablo in any way. But I don't think this really inspires a lot of hope that a Diablo 6 game might be released and it might be a single player focused game and it won't have seasons and it won't have a ridiculous amount of grind and your characters won't reset after a season ends. which are all problems with the current Diablo, is that it's not just like Diablo 2 but better. It's a completely different game that requires specific amounts of time to invest to play within a season, and is designed to be much more grindy and less narrative focused, which I'm more interested in the narrative. Diablo is probably one of those franchises that would benefit greatly if there was a Diablo for Dummies or a Diablo abridged version where you played the Diablo games, but it was like all 5 games taking over the course of 20 to 30 hours, just having you see the highlights of the stories and the gameplay as far as bosses you would fight and cutscenes you would see. And then you would take out, in the case of Diablo games, you take out the randomization of drops and instead have a modded version of the game that drops just the best equipments possible, and then that way you can skip a whole bunch of grinding from in between the boss fights. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see if they name anybody or who they name as the new person in charge of Diablo, and whether that name will be anybody we even know of or have heard of before. Okay. And so the Tron Catalyst developer BitHell Games makes a majority of full-time employees redundant. BitHell Games has always been refined and elevated by our people. Today we are less, is a quote, as they are laying off people. So I think that's the end of the GameDeveloper.com games. And so what I think we're going to see now is I'm just going through all the new games on Steam, which I'm going to try and burn through these fairly quickly, but questionable how well I can do that when every single one of these tabs is going to load up. And then I suspect there will be a case where the next group of tabs might have something in it, might have some more stories and news stories, but I think we're probably done. This was another day where the first time I ran this macro was early in the morning, so I think that's sort of works. Doesn't 100% work, I think, but it does at least give me a first opportunity to say when I start wanting to stream in the evening, be close to being ready to start streaming in the evening. As for today, I was able to make like one recording, I think. Yeah, I think it was only one, of PC Building Simulator. Then had to run the macro a second time, and then immediately had to start streaming, which yeah, is almost certainly part of the reason why I'm just feeling off today, is that I really just haven't been awake long enough doing stuff. But yeah, it's becoming more frequent that I am just feeling off on certain days. Yeah. I'm not sure I have too much else to say. I'm trying to go over in my mind if there's anything else. Yeah, here's another another Gaming on Linux article out of the blue. After the DMCA takedown debacle, Old School Rally has now replaced all affected car models. Okay. Which apparently the assumption there is that they didn't actually own the rights to all of these cars that they were depicting. I did see a YouTuber claim that somebody is making spurious DMCA takedown requests en masse on Steam, which, yeah, I'm not sure if I fully believe that is happening, but I'm not sure I would fully unbelieve this. Now, is this that famous YouTuber lady who was on Geek and Sundry and they kind of pretended like she was in charge of it? This might be her. She looks way older. She had 2 kids and took a lot of time off. Felicia Day is the name of the lady. It looks like Felicia Day. If it was Felicia Day, which is probably a fake name, a stage name like most stage names are, you would think that they would mention that somewhere in the description. So yeah, it kind of looks like Felicia Day, but it might very well be someone completely different. Yeah. I'd assume the problem with Felicia Day is that she didn't start early enough in the business or get lucky enough in the business. Didn't join Scientology or something like that. Just didn't have enough nepotism helping her. But yeah, she got, as an outsider coming in, she got bit roles and did some things, but perhaps stayed too much into the nerdy realm. And maybe she would have gotten bigger if she hadn't made the fatal flaw of choosing to have a family and be a normal human being. Interesting. This looks really nice. It's a shame it's already mixed reviewed. May not really have too many tabs even open for new games, which if that's the case, then it might very well be the case that we are either missing some games or there just wasn't that many games out. Definitely looks like a lot of these we've already looked at. Yeah. And I changed my plugin as far as anti-duplicate tabs, and so because of that, it's automatically closing any duplicate tabs it sees. I think I needed that to be enabled because Firefox was crashing too much, opening too many tabs that were the same tabs otherwise. So there may be a whole bunch of more games. Nah, trolling football you can say no to. Trying to be fairly simplistic and generous in what games I'm going to make a YouTube short on. which is probably too generous. Yeah. For a brief time there, in the past couple days, I kind of felt like we might finally be at a point where we're going to start seeing major AA games and AAA games get released, but I think it is going to be very much just peaks and valleys as far as that goes. Yep. So, yeah, we went through a bunch of games there. I'm not sure if we went through all the new games there, though. So, looks like we're going to be done. House of the Dead 2 got a review from a YouTuber, and he said the visuals were awful and the remake of the visuals and the decisions in the remake, because apparently the code was lost for House of the Dead 1, and so that's why they remade the first game, and now they're same company's remaking the second game even though the source code isn't lost. And yeah, he just says it's worse in every way. So I'd have a tendency to believe him. It would be nice if House of the Dead 1 and 2 remakes got majorly improved, but I don't think they ever will. I think that this is going to be poor quality no matter what. Alright, well, as far as I can tell, I think we've gone through all the games that came out today, so